Imagine this. One day, you're a constant presence in his life. Your messages pop up on his phone. Your voice lingers in his ear. Your energy fills his world. Then suddenly, nothing. Silence. A void where you used to be. That's when it hits him. That's when he starts to feel the weight of your absence. See, most people don't truly appreciate what they have until it's gone. And I don't mean just not around as much. I mean completely gone. No texts, no calls, no liking his posts, no casually checking in. You remove yourself so thoroughly from his world that it forces him to confront a reality he never thought he'd have to face. Life without you in it. Here's what most people get wrong about breakups. They think if they stay in contact, keep a connection alive, or even just remain visible, they're somehow keeping the door open for reconciliation. But what they're really doing is giving the other person a safety net. He doesn't have to miss you, because in some form, you're still there. The comfort of knowing he can reach you, even indirectly, keeps him from ever truly feeling the loss. But when you remove yourself completely, that's when the regret starts creeping in, because suddenly there's no reassurance, no quick dopamine hit of checking your stories and seeing something familiar, no easy way to know what you're thinking or how you're feeling. And that uncertainty, that's what drives people crazy. It's human nature. We don't value what feels guaranteed. We crave what we can't have. Silence does what words never can. It creates a gap, a vacuum, a mystery. And in that space, he'll start filling in the blanks. He'll wonder where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. His mind will spiral into scenarios he never had to consider before. Is she moving on? Is she happier without me? Did I make a mistake? And here's the most important part. When he does start to feel that regret, you won't be there to soothe it. That's crucial, because if you break your silence, the moment he reaches out, you relieve the tension. You give him the answer he was looking for, that he still has access to you, that he doesn't actually have to feel the loss because you're still in some way available. So you stay silent, you let him sit with it. And the longer that silence stretches, the heavier it becomes. Now, let's be clear. Silence isn't about playing games. It's not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. It's about sending a clear message, not to him, but to yourself, that you refuse to be an option, a backup plan, or an emotional crutch. It's about reclaiming your power. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop feeding his ego with attention, is the moment the dynamic shifts. And this isn't just about making him regret losing you. It's about you realizing your own worth. Because when you go silent, something incredible happens. You start to break the habit of seeking validation from him. You stop checking your phone, waiting for a message that may never come. You stop revolving your emotions around his actions. And instead, you turn that energy inward. You start focusing on yourself, you pour that attention into your own life, you create a reality that is so fulfilling, so rich, that whether he regrets losing you or not becomes irrelevant. And ironically, that is when he feels it the most, because nothing is more powerful than a woman who isn't looking back. This is where most people get stuck. They assume that silence means waiting, that going no contact is just a temporary strategy to get a reaction. But that's where they go wrong, because silence is only effective when it's genuine, when you're not just pretending to move on, you actually are. So you don't check his social media, you don't casually ask mutual friends about him, you don't sit there analyzing what he might be thinking. You make peace with the fact that he might never reach out, and you decide that's okay. Because your happiness was never supposed to be dependent on his response. And that shift, that's what makes the impact 10 times stronger. Because when he does realize what he lost, when he finally reaches out, he's not going to find the same woman who used to be available at his convenience. He's going to find someone who no longer needs his validation, someone who's not waiting around for closure, someone who has become so whole within herself that whether he regrets it or not doesn't change her reality. That's the moment he truly feels the loss, not when you're silent for a week or two and then respond to his "I miss you" text. Not when you go no contact only to break it when loneliness kicks in, but when he finally realizes you don't need him anymore. That's when the regret really sets in. So if you're in this position right now, if you're debating whether or not to reach out, ask yourself, what are you really looking for? Are you hoping to remind him of your worth? Because the truth is, people only truly appreciate your worth when they have to work to get back into your life. And if you give him easy access, he'll never value value it. Your silence isn't about him. It's about you. It's about giving yourself the space to heal, to grow, to evolve. And in doing that, you naturally create the kind of absence that speaks louder than any words ever could. Let him feel it. Let him sit with the weight of losing you, because if he was ever meant to be in your life, he'll realize it. And if he doesn't, you just prove to yourself that you were always better off without him. Think about the moments right after a breakup. The confusion, the impulse to reach out, the overwhelming need for answers. It's a natural reaction. You shared a connection with this person, and now that connection has been severed. And yet here's the paradox. The more you seek clarity from him, the more power you give away. The more you try to remind him of your value, the more you undermine it. Because true value is never proven, it's felt. And the only way for him to feel your absence is for you to step back completely. Most people believe that closure comes from a conversation, that if they can just say the right thing, express their emotions perfectly, or get some kind of validation, they'll be able to move on. But closure isn't something you get from another person, it's something you give yourself. And that's where silence is your greatest weapon, not as a tool of manipulation, but as an act of self-respect. When you remain silent, you create space for him to sit with his own thoughts, space for him to realize what life feels like without your presence, and most importantly, space for you to regain control over your emotions instead of letting them be dictated by his actions. Because let's be honest, when you're constantly checking your phone, rereading old messages, or wondering if he's thinking about you, you're still invested in the dynamic. And as long as you're emotionally invested, you're not truly moving forward. Now, let's talk about the psychology behind this. Human nature dictates that we value what feels scarce. When something is abundant, when it's always available, always accessible, we take it for granted. But the moment something becomes out of reach, our brain assigns it a higher value. It's why people chase what they can't have. It's why we crave what we've lost. And it's why your silence is far more impactful than any words you could ever say. If you reach out, if you try to remind him of what he's missing, you're actually relieving him of the need to think about you. Because now he doesn't have to wonder. He doesn't have to feel the absence. He doesn't have to question whether you've moved on. You've just given him his answer. You're still there. But when you say nothing, when you disappear completely, that's when the real questions start forming in his mind. Did I make a mistake? Is she over me? Was she really as invested as I thought? That uncertainty plants a seed of doubt, and that doubt over time grows into regret. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What if he doesn't care? What if my silence doesn't make a difference? And that's a fair question. The truth is, if he genuinely doesn't care, then nothing you say or do was ever going to change that. But that's exactly why silence is so powerful, because it forces the truth to reveal itself. If he was always going to move on easily, at least now you're not wasting your time trying to convince him to care. And if he does care, your silence will make him feel it on a much deeper level than any conversation ever could. But here's the most important part. Your silence isn't just about him. It's about you. It's about creating the space you need to emotionally detach. Because let's be honest, right now, your mind is likely consumed with thoughts of him. What is he thinking? Will he reach out? Does he regret it? But every time you entertain those thoughts, you're keeping yourself stuck. You're giving your energy to someone who, at this moment, isn't giving theirs to you. And that's why the most powerful thing you can do isn't to wait for him to notice your absence. It's to make your absence irrelevant to your happiness, to stop making him the focal point of your thoughts, to shift that energy inward and start prioritizing yourself. So here's the challenge. Instead of breaking the silence, break the pattern. Instead of seeking his validation, seek your own growth. Instead of wondering if he'll reach out, ask yourself, does it even matter? Because the reality is, the person who regrets the breakup the most isn't the one who is left missing someone. It's the one who wakes up one day and realizes the person they once had is no longer even accessible to them. That's what real power looks like. Not in making him miss you, but in becoming someone he doesn't have access to anymore. Someone who doesn't need his attention to feel worthy. Someone who isn't waiting around for regret to set in, but is already moving forward, creating a life so fulfilling that whether he regrets it or not is just an afterthought. And when you reach that point, that's when he really feels it, because nothing makes someone feel the weight of loss more than knowing that the door isn't just temporarily closed, it's permanently shut. and the person they once had access to, she's long gone. One of the hardest things to accept after a breakup is the idea that someone who once cared about you, someone who shared moments, memories, and maybe even a future with you, can suddenly seem indifferent. It's unsettling, isn't it? The thought that they can go about their life as if you never existed while you're left analyzing every moment, every word, every detail, wondering what went wrong. And that's where so many people make their biggest mistake. They assume that just because someone looks like they've moved on, it means they don't feel the loss. But here's the truth. People don't always process loss immediately. Sometimes it's only when you step back completely that they truly start to feel what's missing. You see, there's a phenomenon in psychology known as the Zeigarnik effect. It states that our brains are wired to fixate on unfinished business. When something feels unresolved, it lingers in our minds far longer than something we've been able to process and put to rest. And this is exactly why silence is so powerful. It leaves things open-ended. It denies him the closure he may not even realize he needs. It forces him to sit with unanswered questions, with loose ends that his mind will instinctively try to tie up. But he can't do that if you're not engaging, if you're not giving him anything to work with, if you're no longer there feeding his ego, reminding him of your presence. Most people don't realize this, but when you continue to engage with someone after a breakup, whether it's through casual check-ins, emotional messages, or even subtle social media posts that are meant to be accidentally seen, you're actually making it easier for them to move on. Why? Because you're helping them process the breakup in a way that feels safe and controlled. They still get to have you in their orbit. They still get to feel connected to you in some way. And as long as they have that, they don't feel the full impact of what they've lost. But when you go completely silent, that's when the mind starts to chase. That's when the questions creep in. Is she thinking about me? Has she moved on? Did I make a mistake? And here's the interesting part. The brain hates uncertainty. It will do whatever it can to resolve it. And that's why often the moment you stop giving someone access to you, that's the moment they start to feel the void in a way they didn't expect. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about playing games. This isn't about manipulating someone into wanting you back. It's about understanding a fundamental truth of human behavior. People value what they think they might be losing. They don't appreciate something that is constantly available to them. And unfortunately, when you try too hard to remind someone of your worth, you end up making yourself too accessible. You remove the mystery. You eliminate the very thing that makes them wonder about you in the first place. Think about it. When you know exactly what someone is doing, how they're feeling, and where they stand, there's no need to think about them deeply. There's no emotional pull. But the moment you stop revealing everything, the moment you become a mystery again, that's when curiosity kicks in. And curiosity is one of the most powerful emotional triggers because it leads to investment. Here's something to consider. Have you ever noticed that we tend to remember people from our past not exactly as they were, but in an idealized way? The further removed we are from a situation, the more our brain fills in the gaps with nostalgia, with exaggerated emotions, with selective memory that highlights the good and minimizes the bad. This is why people often reconnect with an ex months or even years down the line. It's not that they suddenly realize something overnight. It's that time and distance allowed them to feel the loss more intensely. Now, imagine if instead of making it easy for him to process the breakup, you made it impossible for him to do so completely. Imagine if, rather than giving him emotional breadcrumbs to hold on to, you took them away entirely. Suddenly, his mind starts playing tricks on him. He starts wondering if he underestimated you, if he took you for granted, if you were actually far more valuable than he realized at the time. But here's the key. You can't just go silent while secretly hoping for a reaction. That defeats the purpose. The real power of silence comes from genuinely letting go, from deciding that your peace, your healing, and your self-worth are more important than whether or not he regrets losing you. Because here's the ironic twist. When you truly move on, when you stop waiting for the moment he realizes what he lost, that's often when it happens, because now it's no longer an act, it's real, and people can feel that authenticity. So ask yourself, what would happen if, instead of worrying about his feelings, you focused entirely on your own? If, instead of playing the role of someone waiting to be missed, you stepped into the role of someone who doesn't need validation from the past, Because the moment you do that, the balance of power shifts. And suddenly, it's not about him anymore. It's about you. And that's when you become unforgettable. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've become something far rarer. Someone who doesn't chase. Someone who doesn't beg for attention. Someone who is so focused on their own growth that whether or not he ever regrets losing you becomes irrelevant. And when it's no longer about him, that's when he feels it the most. One of the most misunderstood aspects of breakups is the way emotions work in waves. In the immediate aftermath, it's easy to believe that the person who initiated the breakup or the person who seems indifferent is genuinely unaffected, that they've detached, that they don't care. And because of that perception, so many people fall into the trap of over-explaining, over-proving, over-trying, because they assume that if they don't, they'll be forgotten. But this assumption couldn't be further from the truth. What most people don't realize is that emotional detachment is often delayed. It's rarely immediate. Think about it. When someone makes a decision to leave, in their mind, they've already been detaching before the breakup. They've been preparing themselves mentally, justifying their choice, convincing themselves they're doing the right thing. That's why in the beginning they may seem so unaffected. But that detachment is artificial. It's surface level. And it only holds as long as they don't feel the consequences of their choice. And this is why stepping back is so powerful. It forces them to experience exactly what they chose. It's one thing to think you want space, to believe you'll be fine without someone. It's an entirely different thing to actually live in that reality. When you remove yourself genuinely, completely, without passive-aggressive tactics or breadcrumbs, you create the conditions for them to feel the loss, not just intellectualize it. But here's the problem. Most people never give this space enough time to work. They panic. They mistake initial silence for permanence. They assume that because they haven't heard from him in a week, 2 weeks, a month, that he's definitely moved on. And so they break the silence, they check in, they remind him they're still there, and the moment they do that, they relieve him of the discomfort that was just starting to build. They give him reassurance that he doesn't even realize he needed. You have to understand that people don't feel loss instantly. They feel it in waves. At first, there's relief, especially if the relationship had any tension toward the end. Then there's distraction. Maybe they immerse themselves in work, in friends, in someone new, but eventually, inevitably, the distractions wear off. The reality sets in, and if you've given them nothing to latch onto in the meantime, that's when they start to question, did I make the right choice? Was she actually more valuable than I realized? But for them to get to that point, you have to be completely absent. Not in a way that's dramatic, not in a way that's meant to punish them, but in a way that allows them to fully experience what it's like to be without you. Because only in your absence can they ever truly recognize your value. Now, some people will say, but what if he never realizes it? What if he never comes back? And that's a fair question, but let's flip it. What if he never had to feel your absence at all? What if, by constantly checking in, staying connected, keeping that emotional door open, you made it so easy for him to move on that he never had to process anything? The reality is, if someone doesn't feel the loss, they never reflect, they never reconsider. And if that's the case, was there ever a real connection to begin with? But let's go deeper, because this isn't just about making him regret. This is about reclaiming your power. Every time you break the silence because you're afraid of losing him, what you're actually doing is reinforcing the idea that he is the one in control, that he gets to decide the terms of your interaction, the pace of your healing, the level of your self-worth. And that's the part that needs to change. Because here's what's actually happening. If you constantly reach out, even subtly, you're reinforcing his belief that you need him more than he needs. And human nature is wired in a way that makes us devalue what we think will always be available. The only way to shift that dynamic is to let go, not just physically, but emotionally, to stop checking, to stop waiting, to stop hoping for a reaction. Because when you truly move on, that's when you become intriguing again. That's when he starts to wonder, how is she doing this? Is she happier without me? Was I wrong about her? This is why silence isn't just about absence, it's about transformation. You're not just sitting there waiting for him to notice, you're becoming the version of yourself that is no longer waiting for him at all. And when that shift happens, when your silence is no longer a strategy, but a byproduct of your own self-respect, that's when the tables turn. So here's what I want you to remember. Silence is not just the absence, it's the presence of power. It's the space in which regret grows. It's the moment where someone is left alone with their own choices, their own thoughts, their own realizations. And the most profound part, by the time they start to regret, you may not even care anymore. And that is the real victory. There's a fundamental truth about human nature that most people overlook in relationships. We don't fully appreciate something until we fear losing it completely. And not just in a theoretical sense, but in a visceral, undeniable way. This is why distance creates one of the most powerful emotional responses in a person. It forces them to confront something they never had to before. The possibility that you are truly gone. See, when a breakup happens, especially if he was the one to end things, or if he assumed you'd always be there, it's easy for him to believe he has time to explore other options, time to figure out what he really wants, time to see if he misses you while still knowing you're within reach. And because of that illusion of safety, he doesn't feel the urgency to act. Not at first, but what happens when that illusion is shattered? When you don't reach out, don't check in, don't give him even a hint that you're waiting in the wings, suddenly he has to sit with a new, uncomfortable reality. One that says she might actually be gone, for real. And that's where the regret starts to creep in. Now, this isn't about playing mind games. It's not about trying to manipulate emotions or punish him for his choices. It's about letting someone experience the weight of their